Nick, what's going on, man? Thanks so much for joining us again this morning.
Hey, how you guys doing?
We're doing very well. You were treated to a funny little overheard conversation there in the break, which we'll not go on air with.
I heard nothing. I heard nothing.
I think T-Bob did it on purpose, but we'll talk about it later.
Look, it's the first thing you do when you get in a hotel room, okay? I don't know what else to tell y'all. The Saints, on the other hand, Nick, I don't know. I said it earlier in the show. I feel like I'm losing my own credibility and when I look at myself in the mirror because I don't know what to make of this team. Now I'm like back to convincing myself that they're kind of really good and could be like back at top with like just a couple of moves that work out shrewdly or not. I mean, you definitely felt like getting Marshawn Lattimore back and Caden Ellis continues to shine. It's just, I just don't know what to make of this team. But if nothing else, it is massively impressive how they have climbed out of that 4-9 hole when we had all left them for dead.
Yeah, I mean, look, the one thing, it's tough. It's tough with this season because it's unprecedented territory, and it's been so stable for so long, and there were always two pillars to lean on, and then when Breeze left, there was still Sean to lean on. So I think all of us kind of gotten caught up in like being prisoners of the moment, and it's hard just to kind of have that calm, big picture outlook when you don't really know what to expect and you don't know what the floor is. And when it felt like things were bottoming out, we didn't know how low it could go because the situation had never been there before with Dennis Allen. But I think one of the things that we're seeing, and this is going to sound so dumb, but like good players matter. And when you don't have good players, it's not an excuse. Like if we came out of this game being like, the Saints beat Philadelphia and you know what, Jalen Hurts didn't play, but who cares? They're supposed to be the same exact team. Like that is an idiotic statement. Yet when you talk about a team that you're focused on and you bring up, oh, well, Marshawn Lattimore's not playing. Well, that's an excuse. It's not an excuse. It's an actual cause to why things maybe aren't as good as they should have been. Then he comes back and he delivers them a win. Look, I'll say I think their defense is incredibly legit. I mean, they've been top of the league really since probably about 8 or 9 weeks ago. Every category, if you kind of isolate it for that period of time, they're right up there in every single category. And that's without Lattimore. And they did that in this game without Marcus May, which was significant. Daniel Sorensen, gave up the last 48 yards on that touchdown. He was out of place on a couple big runs. So, I mean, the loss of May was significant, but they found a way to still do a good job, hold them to 10 points and be a good team. I think there's still significant offensive issues. I mean, they're down 3 offensive linemen, so that's kind of tough to kind of correlate, what the effect was on that. But there's something here. It's not completely bleak, I think, going into the future. The way they ended the season, I think, is important. And there might be something here to build on. Like, I think DA's seat's still going into next year. I'm not going to say it's hot, but I think it's still sitting over top of the fire pit. And if they lose a couple of games, it gets ignited and then his seat is hot. But there is something here that you're looking at it and saying, well, maybe, if they get a little bit better on offense, maybe figure out how they want to use their players, get a quarterback. I mean, those are all huge things you got to figure out, but it's maybe not as bad as it felt a month ago or 6 weeks ago.
All right, Nick, give me the best case scenario then. Like, give me some of the things that need to play out for the Saints to feel better about, next season, because they did end the season well. I mean, they still have the ear of the team, which I think is very important. They're still playing hard, but what are some things that need to play out? How does it need to play out in the offseason for the New Orleans Saints?
Well, first thing, get Tom Brady out of the division and how many games you got to win to win it. I think it's going to be really bad in the South. So first of all, I don't think the barrier is that high to be good. Now, starting at the top, I mean, absolutely, they have to get a quarterback, and I would call New England and see maybe if Mac Jones is available. Guys like that, I doubt you're going to find like that surefire absolute answer with kind of the way things play out this offseason. There just really aren't the assets, but maybe you can get one of these guys that are shaken free somewhere else, and he could be somebody. If not, I think you go through all your options, and if everything bottoms out, you go back to Andy Dalton and go from there. I think you can win games with him. As we continue to see, he's not going to lead you to a victory, but you can be competitive with him on the field. But I think they want to try to aim just a little bit higher in that area. They got to get some interior defensive linemen. I mean, I think that's a very, very significant issue for them. It's not working out there how they want it to. The run defense is soft. They aren't getting the interior push they want. Onyemata is coming to life a little bit late in the season, but it's kind of, too little, too late.
Yeah.
I think they got to get another wide receiver. I think they need 2 running backs. I think they need someone to fill in for Alvin while he's probably likely serving a suspension early next year, and they need a power back. I think the biggest mistake they made this year is they went into the season with this identity of wanting to be like a play action team that can throw down the field, and everything they did this offseason told us that. They went out and they got all the receivers. They bring back Jameis Winston, then Jameis gets hurt, and then they shift to this identity of being something completely different, and it's a run between the tackles type team. Alvin Kamara is not that type of player, so they need that power back. I think that was their biggest miss this offseason, so they need to figure that out. And then I think they got to figure out their offensive staff. Is it somebody different than Pete Carmichael? If it is Pete, can they be a little bit more effective in, having an identity and knowing what they want to do and utilizing players in the fashion and that they need to be used to be at their best. So there's a lot of work I think that they need to figure out. Pass rush too off the edge. I mean, that's another one. Like it's a significant issue. Marcus Davenport's basically been, benched. He's getting like 15 snaps a game. Peyton Turner's doing nothing. Carl Granderson's kind of risen up a little bit, but they need more out of that. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff they got to do. The good thing, though, again, they're in the NFC South. If they win 8 or 9 games next year, that might be enough to get into the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. One guy who has seen it all, Nick, is Cam Jordan, man. When you talk about maybe some of the most underappreciated players in the NFL, he should probably be at the top of the list. And yes, he's made like all-decade teams and everything, but rarely is he ever talked about when people mention guys like J.J. Watt and others, when you're talking about the top of the top, right? And maybe he's not there anymore, but he does become the Saints' all-time leading sack man on Sunday, overcoming the Hall of Famer Ricky Jackson. What does Cam Jordan mean to this team, like even this year's team specifically? And then what has it meant to you, who has covered this team so closely, to get to watch a guy who I believe will be in the Hall of Fame firsthand for so many years?
Well, I mean, first, what he means to the team, I mean, he's kind of like the only guy performing in the pass rush. It's like him and Caden Ellis. And that's really kind of the only guys that are getting up to the quarterback and converting there. And without him, I think they'd be in significant trouble. And they've been kind of trying to find, I don't want to say his replacement, but at least his successor, since 2018. And they've put significant draft assets in there, and they have failed kind of miserably in that pursuit. So having him around, I think, is huge for this team. And I think that he should still be a big part of the team going forward. I think he's still got a few good years left. As far as covering him, like he's the embodiment of steadiness and just consistency and just always the same, always in the same good mood. I mean, it's just kind of incredible the way he goes through life. Like you don't see ups and downs with Cam. It's like just ups all the time. And I think that's important in the locker room. I think it's important for that team and their culture and all that stuff. And just watching him, just how he's a student of the game. And when you can get Cam in like honest moments, he's got his personality. So sometimes it's hard to get, to the insight of like how things are working and why they're working. But like when he takes the time to like really break down the game, like he's just so smart and knowledgeable. And I've learned a lot from him in those conversations, just about pass rush and, just kind of like game theory stuff, even like how he sets people up and kind of the counters and all that stuff. I mean, he's just been a great asset to have around in that locker room. And, this year especially, it's kind of been a tough locker room. This is kind of stuff people probably don't care about, but it's been a tough locker room just as far as, guys consistently being available, wanting to talk about it. Like during the downtimes, you saw like a real downturn in the attendance in the locker room. Cam was there though, and he'd answer those questions after the tough losses. He'd be the guy in the locker room after the Tampa game. Like he had tears in his eyes kind of talking about it, but he was still there while a lot of other guys kind of, veered from that responsibility. So again, that steadiness, he's just someone that always shows up for every aspect. And, he takes the time to show respect to everybody he comes in contact with.
Legend.
Nick, one of the things that we've talked about he is a legend, unquestioned. The things we've talked about is, players that we didn't have really a role for coming into this season, and they've stepped up. Like Rashid Shaheed, I asked you about him last week. He continues to be impressive. He had another right at 60-yarder in this game. I mean, this feels like a player that has a role in this team. This isn't just like a nice story because you're not in the playoffs. Like this feels like a player that maybe you found your next diamond in the rough, which the Saints have been so good at over the last couple of years.
Yeah, it kind of started out feeling like, he's kind of like a fun player. They found someone that can stretch the field a little bit, like maybe like a high-end Joe Morgan type player. At first you're looking at him with some return ability, and suddenly like it just keeps, there's more and more, and he's he's doing everything good. Like he runs every route. He seems like a weapon. Like he's looking like someone that can be like a legit number 2 type player. Now I think they need to go out and find like, that other guy, the number 3. Maybe you get Mike Thomas to buy back in. He'd be the perfect third guy with Shaheed and Olave, and then you throw in Juwan Johnson. Like going back to where they're going in the future. Like there are some really good young pieces, I think, on this team that they can build around, and he's one of them. But now you got to find the quarterback too. Like, is Andy Dalton the guy that you want with those two? Like, I think that needs to be one of the efforts this offseason. Like, you need to find the guy that fits with everybody, and that might be mission impossible, but I don't think that you just look at Andy Dalton and say, hey, we're going to run it back with him. Like, you need someone that can get the ball down the field to these guys and do everything else while also kind of making good, solid decisions and not turning the ball over and all that stuff. But I think that needs to be priority number 1. But he's been outstanding. And then the other guy defensively, just kind of finding diamonds in the rough. Like Caden Ellis coming out of nowhere. Like I think he is like a legitimate possible top tier type linebacker. His pass rush ability is crazy. He's covering really well. He is going to be a free agent. So I think they're going to have to pay to keep him. I think they're going to have a really, really hard decision, because if you pay him to come back now, somebody probably has to go, if not this year, next year. And that might be the Demario Davis replacement if they look at it that way. And I think that should be a really hard conversation they have this offseason.
Yeah, hey, you mentioned real quick Juwan Johnson there, and I was going to ask you about him. Like, the tight end position was such a question mark coming in to this season, but now, like, having Juwan Johnson, who's right at 500 yards receiving, even with missing a couple of games, he's been so key here down the stretch. And you still have Adam Troutman, who can do some of the nitty-gritty in the run game, obviously. And then you have, obviously, the Taysom Hill portion of this, and he can do different things. Like, that was a big question mark, but now it seems like you've kind of got it figured out. Juwan Johnson might be one of the best-kept secrets in the NFL.
Yeah, they got a really good tight end room for sure. Juwan just gets a little more consistent, blocks a little more.
Right.
Like there's another step there for him to become even better. That type of yardage from a tight end, like it's hard to find, and they got him, and I think he's going to be a big piece of this team going forward. Like you said, Troutman doing the nitty gritty stuff, like he was excellent in this game and run blocking. One of the reasons they were able to close it out is just his ability there. I think it's fair to say that maybe he's been a little bit disappointing on the receiving end, but he's found his role, the draft compensation being what it is. I mean, that's kind of gone, but he's still a valuable player for this team. And yeah, Taysom, I mean, if they can figure out how to get him more involved too in that tight end role, blocking a little bit more and all that stuff, I think that there's still more for him in that kind of, football player role that he's in. And I think that was set back a little bit this year with the injury, and then you had quarterback injury, so he was forced back into the quarterback role. I don't think he's fully acclimated to, being a tight end, but I do think that they have 3 really good guys there in their tight end situation. Like you said, coming into the season, it was a massive question mark, and they're probably in a better situation than a lot of teams in the league right now there.
Yeah, talking Nick Underhill at Nick_Underhill. New Orleans on Football is the site. Go sign up today. Speaking of Taysom, Nick, it seems like during this 3-game win streak, the Taysom package has been doing very well. Like, you're starting to fully take advantage of it. If you do get into a post-Carmichael era, do you think who you bring in, like, would you require them to be like, hey, we are going to continue to evolve this?
I think that's a conversation you definitely need to have. These are our pieces. What are your vision for them? That would probably be one of my first interview questions for anyone. How would you use Taysom Hill? What do you think about the way, the Saints have been using them, and how would you build on that and do it differently? I mean, they have a lot of money invested in him, and I think we're seeing that he is really one of the more unique weapons in the league. And I think kind of having him around is one of the ways that you can kind of offset being mediocre at quarterback. You can do some different things and get some upside there with the players you have. So yeah, no matter who it is, like if you're bringing in someone that doesn't have a vision for him, he's probably not creative enough to be an offensive mind in 2023. Fair. Anyhow, like this is a direction the league's going. Like if you can't figure out like a read option package and stuff like that, like you're just way behind at this point. So, but yeah, that would be criteria 1. And even if it's Carmichael, like I would have that conversation with them immediately after the season ends. Okay, like how do we evolve this? What are the next steps? Like what does this package look like 6 months from now after you have the offseason to brainstorm some stuff? Because it definitely needs to be more, and they need to find that balance with it. And I think we saw, like, even in this game, it kind of felt like they were aware of like everything they were doing wrong and tried to make efforts to fix it. Now I know, like, coverage dictates how many screens you can throw and all that stuff, but they got one out, gained 8-9 yards on it, used Taysom early. There's just a bunch of stuff that they were doing that it was like, all right, finally, like they're finally doing all this stuff. So if they can figure out how to build on that, okay. I do think though that you do sit down and say like, overall, okay, is the offense and the people running it, are these the right people? Every position go through it, and then kind of go from there.
And Nick, I'm sorry we've already kept you so long, but I do have one more that I got to get off here, and that is what do you think this Carolina game means to the team and kind of the franchise as a whole here, as looking to finish this season off 4-0, which a lot of people, I can't remember who said it, you had it in the article, but a lot of people kind of rolled their eyes when they talked about finishing this season 4-0. What does it mean to this team this came on Sunday?
Yeah, that was Pete Werner. He came out coming back from his injury, and he's like, "Yeah, we're gonna finish the season 4-0." And that was after the Tampa game, and it's like, "Yeah, all right, man." Like that felt like the lowest point of the season. Like I was thinking that it was gonna completely implode at that point, honestly. And my private thoughts were like, "Man, this is screwed. Like there's no way out of this." And they found their way out. And I think finishing the mission would speak volumes internally. I think the team just ending on that high note, going on into the offseason, though, and hey, they went on a 4-game stretch. They got healthy and they kind of figured it out. And look, as hard as we've been on Dennis Allen all year, I think he deserves some credit for figuring some of this stuff out too. A lot of the stuff that we were hammering on for early in the season, the penalties and just the foolish mistakes, it's not completely gone, but it's significantly better than it was. So if he can continue to learn from this season, come back next year, fix some of those mistakes, it's possible that they have a little bit better coaching next season than they had throughout this whole year. But I think just capping it off on that high note would mean a lot. Now, if they lose, I don't think it changes the course of anything. But I just think psychologically, being able to go through a quarter of the season undefeated, I think that would mean a lot for this team.
Nick Underhill is the absolute best, man. And again, if you're a Saints fan, you got to sign up for New Orleans Football. Thank you so much, Nick.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, shout out Chris Pratt, brought to you. Nick, every week brought to you by Chris Pratt.